in here. Thank you, Councilor Almeida. Welcome everyone to the City of Paul Rivers Committee, the whole meeting for Tuesday, October the 14th, 2025. I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. And welcome Councilor Isaacson, and soon we understand Councilor Elliott online. And I'm sure Councilor Palm will be with us shortly. Adoption of the agenda, any changes? Motion to adopt? Councilor Almeida, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Motion to go to a closed meeting, meeting closed to the public. Anybody want to read that? Sure.
I move that the committee move into a closed meeting to discuss matters covered by the community charter under sections 90.1E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, and K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public.
Seconder, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. We will reconvene at 3:30.
Right on left field. For some reason, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, you can always. It was a lovely occasion. There was a lot of happy people. Perfect. They're what? That's what people have been calling for. This is the recovery. It's powerful. We can do this, but God, expensive. Oh, 3 minutes. Yeah.
I wouldn't get you.
I'm sure. Plug it in. Check it. Especially if there are try the boat up. Usually it takes a day or two. Never had any mold or mildew since I've been doing. I've tried a couple. Really work. Oh, I can do that too. Yeah. If you're both plugged in.
How we doing, man? So walk, that's good.
Just, I usually. Okay, less than a minute to go. Oh, not yet. Okay.
Get access.
Yeah. 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 Excellent. Let me know when you're. Oh. Go now? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City of Powell River's Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. I like to honor that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territories of or lands of the Tla'amin people. We have already adopted the agenda and gone in camera, so we now move to item 6, public input period. On this agenda, there is one item on the agenda that is covered by the public input period committee recommendations, and that is 11.1 to do with city-owned lands. So anybody who would like to take up to 2 minutes at this point is welcome to do so by coming forward to the lectern. Okay, seeing nobody, we will carry on to general matters. Delegation Kim Markel and Jessica Colasanto lift community services regarding the 2025 point-in-time homeless count results. Jessica and Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Kim, and I'm here with Jessica, and we're here to discuss the results of the 2025 point-in-time homelessness count for Powell River. Lift Community Services was the local coordinator in partnership with the Homelessness Services Association of BC, which I might just call HSABC because it'll be easier moving forward. This is the second time we've partnered with HSABC on a point-in-time homeless count in Powell River. We first participated 2 years ago in 2023. These counts are really a 24-hour snapshot of homelessness in a community, and the results reflect the number of people who we were able to connect with and who were willing to take a survey in 24 hours who were experiencing homelessness. They are generally considered an undercount, and part of the why for this is the methodology. The methodology relies on connecting with an individual within a 24-hour period of the count. The individuals willing to self-identify as being homeless, which not everyone does. And finally, the individual being willing to take a survey. Our count this year took place on Friday, March 7th, and this year we were able to connect with 80 individuals experiencing homelessness. This number is lower than the 126 identified in the 2023 count. We're not the only community that saw a decrease in numbers compared to the last count. There were 8 such communities across the province, but others, like Campbell River, for example, have had additional housing structures in place. So does this mean that homelessness is improving in our community? Well, not necessarily. We know what we've seen. We know you've heard about the increased visibility and impact of homelessness in the community over the past 2 years. Our outreach team has connected with 62 individuals sleeping rough within city limits, and that's people who are sleeping outside. So again, this number is solely reflective of the number of people experiencing homelessness that we were able to connect with on the 7th.
So we have some consistencies that we're seeing between the 2023 count and this year's count. Specifically, more respondents are long-term local residents than short-term or transient residents. 71% were here 5 years or more. So we hope that this helps to dispel the unfounded rumors that people come to our community solely to access our housing services. There's a majority of people experiencing longer-term homelessness. Most of these are unsheltered, meaning they're not staying in a shelter. And to note that this survey was taken while our emergency shelter was still open. Also not staying in the hospital or another facility. Income remains the top reason for housing loss. And interestingly, this is the first year the count asked if someone's most recent experience of homelessness was the result of an eviction. And in our case, that was 40% of the respondents. And finally, the same as 2 years ago, food security services are the most accessed community support, followed by our emergency room. And then there were differences, primarily in demographics in this year's count. Respondents identifying as Indigenous increased from 18% in 2023 to 39% this year, despite only accounting for 6% of the national census population. We saw youth respondents jump from 9% to 23%. And we saw an increase in individuals identifying as 2S LGBTQIA+ from 10% up to 18% this year. Another interesting element was increased reports of co-occurring substance use and mental health challenges. So while the individual health challenges people experience are similar to what we heard 2 years ago, more people are reporting concurrent health issues this year. We do want to leave time for questions and discussion, so this is a short presentation. We'll end with what we see as some housing and service needs as highlighted by this report. There's an evident need for both, one, emergency shelter services to provide immediate shelter to individuals experiencing homelessness, and two, diverse permanent housing supports that address the needs of specific demographics that include affordable and low-income housing. As a program operator, we're proud to be able to offer low-barrier housing and shelter services, and we call on additional leadership and partnership in the community to work towards fleshing out a continuum of housing supports available here and continue to address the impacts of homelessness in community. And there's a link to the full report if people haven't seen it.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments from council? Oh, Mayor.
Thank you for the report. I have a question, and it relates. I've had calls from 4 parents of their sons or daughters that are homeless here in Powell River. And they made the point that if they were at home, they wouldn't be homeless. When you ask the question of homelessness, does it allow them to say, I'm basically homeless now, but before I came here, I wasn't homeless, or I have the option to go back and live with my parents?
I'm closest to the mic. The survey is a legal sheet, 2-sided, with a lot of different questions. I would say, without having that in front of me, I believe that there's the option to dive deeper into specifics as you go through the survey. There's a short bit, the top half of the first page of the survey. As long as that is completed, then the survey can be accepted. And so in there, I don't think it specifies. It's, you know, very straightforward. But as if someone is willing to stay and answer more questions beyond that, then it can dive into those specifics. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Councillor Pond.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your presentation here today. It's always interesting to see the stats and how they compare to a couple years ago. And one of the stats that jumps off your report for me is the increase in youth and Indigenous lack of housing. Is there any explanation why Indigenous has doubled and youth is becoming major concern.
Okay. Unfortunately, the homeless count really doesn't capture that depth of qualitative data. Youth are people who are under 25, I believe, for the point of this survey. So they're still legally considered adults. And like we shared, one of the biggest deficiencies in this count is that it just captures those people who show up in that period. So unfortunately, I don't have any significant insights into why those numbers have jumped while others haven't.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Well, the question in my mind really kind of relates to the same as Councillor Palm's question. And I wondered, but I don't know if there is actually an answer for this because, as you say, the count is who turns up. But those increases in those demographics, I really wondered if they had directly to do with the fact that less people did show up, and yet you say that you have, Lyft has had direct encounters with 62 people living rough, and I'm aware that the people living rough are generally like a third or so of the overall population, probably a little more countable because you can find them. They have greater needs, but is that a question you can answer? Probably not.
I have something I would share is that over the weekend there was an article in the CBC that we didn't participate in that had to do with the homelessness count and had some community responses from those communities who have seen a decrease in their count this year. And so the Coalition to End Homelessness, as well as someone who's living in our community without shelter and without housing, did provide some insights that they thought might be meaningful. The community member who is unhoused shared that due to the fact that the shelter was closing down during this process, I think we were 1 week or so out from shutting down our services, a lot of people had already dispersed. So they had an inability to come back into the town center and engage in the count in a meaningful way. So I was heartened to see that we have someone who's experiencing the challenges of homelessness, being able to speak up to what prevented themselves and or others from participating.
So if I may, by dispersed, does that mean out into the regional district, like seeking any kind of housing possible or leaving the community? Do you have any idea what was meant by that?
I didn't say it. But I think by dispersed, how I interpret it was that just people trying to find the safest place for them to settle. For some of them, it might be outside of the community, although I would suspect for the vast majority, it would be settling into potentially unsafe situations to be indoors and or establishing secure spaces as secure as possible spaces outside to sleep.
What I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't necessarily indicate a decrease in the collective challenges faced by this population, but also therefore faced by Lyft in trying to serve this population. Would that be accurate?
I'd concur.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments, Council? Thank you very much for bringing this to us. Certainly, it's a, sorry. Oh, Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Picture.
Yeah, through the chair to the presenters, thank you very much for coming today. Given that we're heading into the cold weather, I'm wondering if you are able to say anything about whether Lyft is involved in any extreme weather shelter planning at this stage. I don't know what planning is underway, but wondering if you've been a part of those conversations or are planning to be involved at all in extreme weather, extreme cold weather, or emergency weather sheltering until the temporary shelter opens?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We just received approval from BC Housing to move forward with EWR, or Emergency Weather Response Shelter Planning. And so the next major step, besides writing out a more robust operational document, is trying to track down a site, which has been a barrier for not only an EWR, but a temporary shelter in the community. But we are going to exhaust all opportunities to stand that up as soon as possible. I don't know about you, but when I woke up this morning, I was like, ooh, that would have been a cold night to be outside.
Just
Thank
might
you.
note that the second attachment on your agenda item here on our agenda is only 4 pages long, but has a whole lot of data. For anybody interested, it's really worth looking at, and it's all pictorial and graphs and stuff like that. So it really carries information in a very easy to digest form. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing and coming and bringing that to us. Next delegation, 7.2, Sunshine Coast Forest Landscape Planning Pilot Team, Ministry of Forest, regarding draft Sunshine Coast Forest Landscape Plan. And I am seeing people on our screen who I am assuming will be speaking to this agenda item. Whichever one of you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll jump in. My name is Ryan Jordan. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives in the coast area for the Ministry of Forests. There's a number of partners joining me today to take in the presentation. My colleague Jasmine Paul will be joining me in presenting some information to you. The scope of conversation today is fairly brief. We only have so much time, but we want to cover generally high-level scope of the plan, the Sunshine Coast Forest Landscape Plan pilot project. And we'll get into the partners that are working on the development of the plan, a high-level vision of the plan, some content and structure, and then talk briefly about next steps. So I'll pass it over to my colleague Jasmine to introduce herself, and then we'll get into the material.
Good afternoon. Sure. All right, 1 second. My name is Jasmine Paul. I'm assisting the nations in their participation in the forest landscape planning process. It's lovely to be here today. I understand you have only a short time for us today, so we will go through this rather quickly. And I'm hoping to share screen, but it's there. Can you see that? Fully. Okay, so I think we're going to start just very quickly with vision for the plan. So the nations that are working on this plan are the Squamish, Sishak, Tlayaman, and Homalco nations. And over the last number of years, going back to 2021, we've come together with the province to advance a holistic approach to forest management. So the FLP process came out of a couple of major initiatives by the province, including the adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act and the OLGO Strategic Review. So those are critical components of the overall vision, but we're also looking at a broad and holistic approach to forest management that it can deeply include values that are important to all of us. In 2023, we went out and did some public engagement, and those values you'll see reflected in the content and in the table of contents that I'll go over next. So this is a real paradigm shift from the way that forest management has been done in the past, in a way that we're using Indigenous knowledge and leading edge science to come together and do something new and exciting. So the table of contents, you'll see the two at the top, the co-management and carbon components of the plan. You won't see those when the draft comes out in the draft itself, but they are important parts of the structure of the plan and the way that we're going to work together. So this was co-developed, it will be co-implemented and co-managed as we go forward with nations. We'll also, as we're dealing all with climate change, we want to ensure that carbon is addressed, and it will be addressed through this process, recognizing that the changes in forest management will leave more carbon in the ground, which is certainly what we want. We will also, you'll also see in the plan sections that speak to watershed management and particular, protection of water, Indigenous cultural heritage, cedar stewardship, and how we're managing that through climate change, landscape level ecological integrity, so conservation networks, biodiversity targets, and looking at red and blue listed species, as well as stand level ecological integrity. So you'll see some changes in approach around wildlife habitat features and stand level retention. You'll also see some approaches around riparian management, which are improvements on the current ways that is managed, as well as a focus on timber, wildfire, and recreation. Now, of course, we all want a vibrant forestry economy, and this is an important part of the overall plan. So we're balancing all of these values to bring together a holistic approach to managing the forest going forward. Right?
Thank you, Jasmine. So I'm just going to get into a bit of the structure of the plan. The Forest and Range Practices Act essentially prescribes that, dictates that a forest landscape plan must have outcomes that are specific, achievable, and measurable. And to support those, there will be planning guidelines that go into the plan that essentially provide guidance to the operators on the land base and how to operate to effectively achieve those outcomes. So essentially, the forest landscape plan guides the development of forest operations plans that the licensees will be obligated to develop. And that will in turn show you, the public, and other stakeholders on the land base, the ministry, as well as the Indigenous partners and communities, where those operations are expected to occur over a period of 5 years. So we have that operational level predictability of the activities that are happening on the land base that are guided by and informed by this higher level forest landscape plan. The forest landscape plan essentially itself will be established by order by the chief forester, and that is subject to a number of processes that we're still going through, effectively due process, including rolling out rigorous public engagement to make sure that the plan itself has consulted on with local communities, and the interests of the public have been taken into consideration in the development of the plan. In terms of next steps, we are now up to our eyeballs in engagement with operators, the licensees on the land base, and are hoping to roll out for public engagement here this month. I will be frank with you, though, the ongoing labor dispute is causing some challenging, some logistical challenges for us in terms of rolling that out. So that could potentially delay the rollout of public engagement on the forest landscape plan. Following the public engagement and the wrap up of engagement with industry, we will be bringing forward a recommendation for establishment sometime in spring of 2026. And I'll just stop there and look to the board and other folks for questions if you have any. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for that very high-level overview. I certainly have some questions, but before we get to me, I'm wondering if anybody else on council has questions. Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if you could describe a little bit what your intentions for public engagement. You mentioned robust, and so I'm curious what it will look like and how will people find out about their opportunities to engage?
Thank you. Good question. We are planning for multiple open houses in the engagement. There will be a survey that's distributed at the initial release, along with some potential or targeted stakeholder engagement with specific interest groups, along with a number of other supporting background information, frequently asked questions, etc., to give the public the best perspective on this plan and opportunity for input and engagement.
And so all of those opportunities exist. And so how are you sharing information about that people can sign up to do these things? Where will people be able to find out?
It will come out from Engage BC, and there will be news release in addition to working with local media outlets, radio stations, the like, to make sure we've got the broadest scope of notification as possible.
Thank you.
Here.
Thank you. So at the recent UBCM meeting, there was significant discussion around the fact that the budget from the BC government has gone from a surplus of $3 billion to a deficit of $11.3 billion. In your discussions with the public, will you have an opportunity for each of the major initiatives that you think could come forward, what the economic impact on BC would be?
That's a really good question. It's possible, and yes, we will have a rough outline of what the overall impact is from jobs, gross domestic product, impacts to provincial revenues as it relates to the harvest of fiber from the Sunshine Coast Timber Supply area. It starts to get a little bit limited after that when we're contemplating any potential increases associated with tourism or other benefits that may be increased as a result of the forest landscape plan. But there will be some basic metrics associated with the forest economic side of it, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Okay. This sounds like it may resemble what I have some familiarity with, called a LRMP, Land Resource Management Plan. Is this anything like an LRMP?
Thank you. Another good question. So where they differ is that the LRMP, or Land and Resource Management Plan, or what we're commonly referring to these days as land use planning and forest landscape planning, is that the land use planning exercises are essentially land use designations, and they're either the establishment of parks or some form of zoning done under the Land Act. They take more time, essentially. On the forest landscape planning side, this is really about designing outcomes and guidelines specific to forest resource values under the Forest and Range Practices Act. So we can tackle challenges associated with riparian management strategies, for example, or ecosystem, wildlife biodiversity, wildlife habitat, any values associated with timber, of course, and all within the provincial forest. And more specifically within the Sunshine Coast timber supply area. This plan will not apply to the tree farm licenses, community forest agreement areas, or woodlots.
Okay, that really does fill it in quite a bit for me, because the Forest and Range Practices Act does reference quite a few other acts. And one more question, but what it doesn't reference that you did mention is carbon. Clearly, you did mention DRIPA, so there's a whole lot of policy, existing policy, that is going to inform your work. What policy, is there policy that you're referencing that specifically to do with carbon? And by that, obviously, it's climate related, right?
Another good question. I could take a crack at this if nobody else on the team wants to jump in there. But frankly, the policy on carbon in British Columbia is still being developed. And carbon as a potential revenue source or a management strategy for carbon is gray within the Forest and Range Practices Act. But we have worked closely with some consultants and observed the slowly developing carbon economy to at least have an understanding about what that sector or economy requires in terms of establishing that component within the plan. And essentially, they're looking for a chain of evidence, for lack of a better description, within the forest landscape plan to show that where there is potential for carbon sequestration, that there isn't some other value that is sort of is being applied in that potential space or that potential practice. I'm not answering your question maybe to the level of detail that you're hoping for, but if I'm being honest, that's about as good as I can answer it.
I really appreciate that. And the first thing you said, that underscores all the rest of what you said. So it certainly is a work in progress. And to reiterate Councillor Isaacson's interest, I'm sure there are many. This is a forest industry town, and it's in transition in a big way. There's all sorts of challenges right now, as the mayor referred to, and there was certainly attention at UBCM to this challenge. We're right in the epicenter of it. So I'm sure there are going to be many people in this community who are very interested in your work and will be anxious to participate in whatever way that is possible. So I particularly, but I'm sure I'm speaking for many, are anxious to watch what opportunities there will be to engage, because a number of us send that information out to people who we know are interested, so that there is good engagement. We really count on that, and we have a very engaged community. So unless there's any more questions or comments from council, I will thank you very much. Councillor Palm.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I couldn't resist having attended UBCM and hearing all the concerns that are on the table in regards to our overall forestry industry in the province of British Columbia. First of all, I'm very happy to hear today that in terms of our community forest based lands. There's no intention to get any relevant information to curtail their fine work, which benefits our community greatly. So in a nutshell, the work that you're doing for the provincial government, can you tell me how you are hoping to either advance or limit the amount of work that's being done by our forest industry in the province of British Columbia on the Sunshine Coast presently? How will this study help or hinder?
To be blunt, the forest landscape plan will help by providing operators and the public on the land base with predictability about where activities will occur. And what's informing those activities is both the values that our partner nations have in terms of the forest resource values, but also the incorporation and feedback from the operators on the land base in terms of what's actually operationally practicable. We're not necessarily going to be able to maintain the status quo of forest operations as they once were back in 2000, but there is also acute awareness about the forest sector as a main driver in the local economy, and we want to maintain the integrity of the forest sector to contribute to that economy locally as well.
Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you. I do see this as an increase in, like a real increase in the diversity of perspective towards forestry, and I'm personally looking forward to seeing the outcomes of your work. Really appreciate you all attending, and grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for your time.
We'll see you later, right?
Yes, you will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, on to our consent agenda. Looking for a motion to move the two items on consent agenda. Councillor Isaacson, we do not need a seconder. Any discussion? Being none, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And that moves us down to 11.1, prioritization of council resolutions related to city-owned land. Ms. Howie.
Good afternoon, Chair, Mayor, and Councillors. I'm before you this afternoon to present the prioritization of council resolutions related to city-owned land and to provide an overview of the framework that staff used to evaluate and rank these in-progress resolutions. City-owned lands are among the most valuable and finite public assets. They are held in trust for the benefit of the community for today and for future generations. Given their significance, it is important that decisions about their use are guided by a structured, consistent, and fulsome framework. Staff have collaborated on a prioritization framework to use in this evaluation. At its foundation are 5 principles supported by underlying criteria that translate each principle into specific points of assessment, defining how each resolution is examined. The application of the principles and criteria is informed by context, ensuring the evaluations are responsive to real-world conditions. The first principle is alignment with council's strategic priorities, policies, and plans. Here we looked at how well the initiative supports one or more of council's strategic priorities and its consistency with other relevant city policies, plans, and objectives. The next principle is financial implications. These considerations include assessing budgets and identifying any direct city contributions, such as capital investments, infrastructure improvements, or operating subsidies. We looked at indirect or hidden costs, including servicing, maintenance, or service delivery obligations. The analysis also considered if there are opportunities to leverage external funding through senior government programs, grants, or private investment. And staff also considered if there's any potential for revenue, such as income generation, user fees, payments, or property taxes. The next principle is community benefit, and this is evaluated based on the positive, measurable, and lasting value a proposal brings to the community. This includes social benefits such as housing, health, recreation, economic benefits through revenue generation or job creation, environmental gains from sustainable land use, climate action, and green space enhancement, cultural and civic benefits, including those that promote inclusion, reconciliation, and local arts and cultures, and partnership opportunities for collaboration with other governments, nonprofits, or community organizations. Our next principle is feasibility and risk. This includes readiness, which reflects if the idea is in early concept, emerging, or advancing. Complexity captures the project's technical requirements, interdependent elements, and the degree of in-depth analysis or due diligence required. Staff considered the degree of difficulty, which accounts for time, effort, and coordination required, including dependency on external partners or other levels of government. And finally, risk identifies potential for legal, regulatory, environmental, or consultation requirements that could impact the proposal. Our last principle is organizational capacity. This principle considers staff's capacity to take on new tasks while maintaining existing mandates. It also evaluates the level of cross-departmental coordination required and the potential effect on other departments' work plans and resources. And additionally, it assesses whether advancing the initiative could delay or displace other projects or organizational priorities. By applying the framework to the outstanding resolutions, staff have provided recommendations for prioritization that is rooted in a consistent and comprehensive review process. This results in a list that distinguishes between items of primary, secondary, and tertiary focus, identifying which resolutions are best positioned to advance based on their alignment to the principles, while those with greater complexity or risk that may require or that may progress more gradually. This seeks to balance Council's direction, available staff capacity, financial resources, and the practical realities of implementation. I would like to emphasize that this list is not to suggest that the items appearing on the secondary and tertiary positions are not valuable initiatives or without merit, and their placement does not prevent progress. Rather, the list provides a roadmap for managing work in a way that is transparent, accountable, and aligned with capacity. Finally, I'll end by saying that what staff has provided is a recommendation, and of course, it is Council's discretion to provide alternative direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing report. Brings up some questions of my own mind, but does Council have questions? Councilor Dutt?
I do. We've got 7,000 questions, but I think I'll only ask one or two. And, I read through the report and all of the things, all the issues, the opportunities to take things into account is well listed there. When I read through that, I immediately went to the table that follows it to see what staff's conclusions were about what should be higher than others. One of the things I don't see on the list of considerations is any kind of a point weighting or anything to differentiate one type of a concern from the other, staff time or the other. There's no evaluation, so I don't see that staff could have gone through and said, well, this project earned 100 points and this one only earned 40, so we'll go ahead with 100.1 one. Seems more subjective to me, but I agree that those are all things to be taken into account of. And I see the report that's got primary, secondary, and tertiary reports. I'll just talk about the idea of a housing authority, which is at the bottom of the tertiary reports. And that was on the mind of, I think, every candidate for council during the last election. Is something that I think everybody thought was a priority of some kind, but now it's at the bottom of the list, basically. And down there below it is the one, basically a concept that came to council about tiny homes. Finding a way to fit that into something like a housing authority, and that is in the tertiary one. So what is staff's impression of how this will be used. How will a project that's on the tertiary or secondary list become a priority of council in the next 11 months? So, because that's the time this council has to do anything.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would start by saying that the items that are in the primary, secondary, and tertiary categories are not necessarily ranked within those categories. They're just in a bucket in that category. So it's not intended to prioritize them into that sort of subcategory. So, and I would say with respect to how we, go about this work, again, this is intended to provide us a bit of a roadmap. Certainly, it's not meant to imply that one item has to complete entirely before we can move on to a next item. If we do have the capacity and the time, we can work on more than one item at a time or at once. And then certainly as, items are completed and they come off the list, that allows other items to rise up.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if Councillor Isaacson had her hand up. I thought I saw it.
Yes, I was.
So Councillor Isaacson, then the mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to staff, I'm wondering how this might be used moving forward with new motions if this council passes any new resolutions related to use of city-owned properties or development of housing. Do you imagine a process where this is used to place that motion in one of these three buckets? I guess I'm wondering if subsequent motions are passed, how do we know how they get prioritized with staff workload? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, it would certainly, I think, be helpful to staff that when those new resolutions do come forward, that is, considered as part of that process, how we would place these into this sort of, structure of the work that we're going to tackle. That'll help provide clarity at that time so that we're not, again, before you in a brief period of time with, again, another list of prioritized items.
I think you have a second question, but I can wait my turn.
Well, let's just go for it now.
All right. Second, you know what? Actually, my question is more of an opinion, so I'll wait till the debate.
Okay. Mayor.
Thank you for the report. I like the community impact. I think you've laid out very succinctly what could be an excellent approach to evaluate different projects as they come forward. And, for example, if you were going to use Kepner-Trigor for each one of those community impacts, you could assign a number 1 to 10. But when you were presenting, I immediately thought of pickleball because of the way benefits from each one of those subgroups and how that would work if you went through a formal Kepner-Trigor process. So thank you very much.
Councillor Paul and Councillor Almeida.
Yes, thank you through the chair. First of all, I want to say thank you for this report. It is very succinct and straight to the point, where not only this council, but councils of the future will be able to refer to this and have a roadmap in front of them. And I see a large contingent of pickleballers in the audience today, and I want to assure them that under the primary focus of this report, there are a number of items: prowls, tides, pickleball, Barnett Street rezoning and subdivision, and city property policy 271. Well, if they haven't seen that reference, I want to make sure that they do see it. And we're working in that regard to make these things happen in the shorter term than longer term. Well, thank you very much, staff.
Councillor Almeida.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I was curious, I guess, maybe things got a little foggy in my memory. The Barnett Street rezoning and subdivision, I thought with us putting the shelter in that location as a temporary solution, that was maybe holding off on any other potential project on there, but maybe I'm mistaken on that. So if you could further clarify.
Through the chair to Councillor.
I'm not able to hear.
Just getting the mic going.
Okay, thanks.
Through the chair to Councilor Almeida. So yeah, the Barnett Street rezoning and subdivision is an older resolution that was actually made by the previous council, and this could be why the memory is foggy. It predates your time on council, and it's something that we as staff recalled after the first presentation, and it was a resolution that was passed by council that spoke specifically to the lands where the shelter are located. But as staff began to develop that report and engage with some other parties that potentially have interest in some of these lands, it was realized that there's actually a triangle of land that is in behind the RCMP detachment site that actually would make a great standalone lot. So a lot that could be utilized for some form of non-market housing in proximity to our commercial areas. And so staff would like to highlight this for you, as it would have been a report coming back from staff to say there's an opportunity here. It was missed with the first resolution that focused on the NT zoned lands as opposed to the lands that are in the vicinity. It is lands that is north of the Squatters Creek corridor, but it is a triangle of land that is served by city services, Alberta Avenue connects to it. So it is an opportunity that staff see as a relatively quick fix to have a piece of land that could serve additional housing in the core of our community.
Thank you. I have one question. Reading through this, I'm aware, I thought that, parenthetically, I thought that the matrix that may have been developed to satisfy all the criteria and parameters of your report would have been unimaginably complicated. Anyway, I really appreciate the result, but my question is about I'm aware that quite a few of the projects, or a number of the projects on the list here already are, I won't say in process, but there's been work done on them. So like Director Gao mentioned, even going back to the previous term, and so I just want to confirm that there's actually a whole lot that's actually already been happening, and this is just really a prioritization of a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. And absolutely correct. There is a lot of work ongoing on, every one of these items really. And some of that has been advanced by the very purpose of, coming forward with this prioritization list. So again, it's not sort of intended to mean that, items need to complete fully before we move on to a next item. With the increase in staff capacity, we can look at advancing more of these quicker. This just really helps to give us a bit of a roadmap, a bit of a set of directions on how we apply our time.
That's really good news as far as I'm concerned. So back to Councillor Isaacson.
Thank you. I was just going to make the motion in the package if you're open to that, Chair. I can't see if there's other questions on council right now.
Yeah, I don't see any objections to that. Thank you.
I move that the committee recommend that council endorse the proposed priority ranking for the outstanding resolutions regarding city-owned land, and that the ranking be used to guide staff in advancing work on these resolutions.
Since we don't need a second, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Isaacson?
Yeah, I'll just speak to it briefly. I think the items in primary are ones that potentially have high impact for lower amounts of work, or that are able to be done in a shorter time frame. Some of the secondary and tertiary ones in particular, the Housing Authority, the old Golf Course Lands Trust, the development of city-owned properties, those are have the potential to have really high impact, but we'd be looking at the course of 3 to 5 year period, I think, to make substantive progress on some of those to the level that maybe this council would like. And so I appreciate that the primary ones are ones where there's been movement and it's likely to be more successful in a shorter period of time. I would like to highlight, though, and reiterate what Councillor Dowd said earlier, that the Housing Authority item was on previous council's strategic priorities and is on ours as well. And there's a lot of steps between going from zero to having a housing authority. And one of those may be a decision as to whether a housing authority is the right model, or if some other organizational structure makes sense. Like, for example, the District of Squamish implemented a housing society as opposed to a city-owned housing authority. So I want to reiterate, although that's in the secondary option, I think it's one of those long-term higher impact options where we can make some movement on housing, especially given that so many of our housing societies in town have boards that are quite overtapped and are themselves looking forward to the sustainability of their organizations, and we want to make sure that we get involved in housing in a way that makes sense for our community. So want to reiterate that the importance of housing authority to me, but not to a point to want to alter this list. It's still on the list. I know it will take time, and I'm glad it's in the secondary pool. Thank you.
If no other discussion, Councillor Dowd.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the motion now, so just want to try to express how I feel about this, because I think it all comes back to what council has done or not done so far in my mind about setting out a clear strategic plan and clear strategic priorities. Because in the absence of a clear strategic plan, staff is left to try to make a decision on what councillor motions to follow and what not to, frankly. What will be worked on today and what won't, because there isn't time or staff to do it. Council hasn't done that. Council is passing the motions, and staff is trying to get some kind of a tool to work through to do it in the fairest way possible. And I recognize that. I don't like the result. I'm concerned about the result. There's some important projects there. And I'm not saying that any of these aren't important projects. I agree that the primary ones are probably the most low-hanging fruit and the easiest ones to accommodate. And that's great. But things like a housing authority that takes years to get moving, to study and to do the work and to get going, are things that are needed in the community to get affordable, available housing for people from low income to average working person incomes. And difficult to say that that's not going to be on the list. My concern about this and why I'm not going to support it is because it invites staff to say, we're not going to work on the ones that are lower on the priority list, even though we may have started the work. They're not a priority, so we're not going to continue working on that at the present time. And I disagree with that. I don't know that there's a better way. Maybe the only better way is for council to say, this is our number 1, number 2, and number 3 picks.
Councillor Mira.
Thank you, Chair. Might be asking staff to overcommit, so if that's the case, don't answer this question properly. But I'm curious, without rushing a project any more than you would normally do, the last item on the tertiary list regarding Mr. Hargeet's property, and I don't know Mr. Hargeet personally at all, it's just more of a general question, but we are about a year away from our next election, almost exactly. Is that a project that on a regular timeline and given normal priority or whatever could be accomplished in a year? Or is that something that takes a little bit longer with whatever zoning and processes kind of need to be done?
Through the chair to Councillor Almeida, a road dedication or the closure of a road dedication in a situation like Mr. Hargeet's would be relatively straightforward. It's not a, I mean, there is some time, don't get me wrong, it does take time. And I think the broader question for council is how much do you want us to, even if it's low hanging fruit, do you want us spending time on something like that that is going to serve the benefit of one property owner or and such? But I can compare it to a previous road closure that was about 4 months by the time it was all said and done. Some minor cost to the city that we were able to recoup from the applicant or the party requesting it. So it's not something that we couldn't do. But again, when we're ranking it against other resolutions passed by council, it definitely didn't rank higher than others.
Yeah, I can follow up. I feel like, and I might be the only one that maybe feels this way, but there's been some other talk on council about a few certain items, and I could happily pass this and just accept it, and it's a good enough report. I'm looking at the list and looking at with a year left in term and looking at the secondary items, which are all valuable. But I also am feeling like there's not much traction that staff is going to be able to, I could be wrong, but there's not much traction maybe on 4 of those or most of the items on the secondary list that this council is going to see impact on. And I'll throw out a motion, an amendment, and see if there's traction for it. But I would like to amend the secondary and tertiary to moving Mr. Hargit up to the secondary item and moving the 4 properties, not including the strat plan, down to tertiary. And let's see if there's any interest in that.
Okay, discussion on the amendment, if it was understood. Seeing no discussion, I'm going to call a question. All in favor of the amendment? The amendment, opposed? The amendment does not pass. I just want to say that I appreciate this report. Just 2 things. One is we forget the achievements we have made. That relates to seeing the amount of work that is ongoing, as I mentioned before. And I think a lot has actually been happening that maybe we don't have on our little list. I did do that in my first term because of forgetting what it is that we have accomplished. I'm also very aware of capacity, staff capacity. And so this list looks to me like best bang for the buck in a big way from my viewpoint of my understanding of the projects that are listed here. So I support it. If there's no other, Councillor Palm.
Just last comment through the chair, and that is I don't want anybody to lose the insight of this was a recent ask to prioritize land in our community. And this report is amazing in the amount of time that you have had to put this together. I greatly appreciate this. So let's not lose sight of the fine work that's been done here. Thank you very much. Ready to vote.
All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Motion passes. Thank you very much. So before we go on any further, I need to mention something that I forgot at the very beginning of the meeting, and that is to mention that Councillor Elliott is away with leave. Just so everybody knows that she's just not skipping school. That leaves us down to public clarification. And I first would like to ask Mr. Galinsky if he has any questions to ask. Thank you, Mr. Galinsky, for your long-term and excellent service. Anyone else with questions on anything that came up in our agenda this afternoon? For our second time? Seeing none, anyone online? No one's online. In that case, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night, all.